Women's and Gender History. She's the director of the Department of Humanities, and she was president of the Italian Association for North American Studies and president of the Italian Association of Women History. She's a member of the editorial board of the historical journal Contemporanea, in which recently she published with Elisabetta Vezzosi a very interesting forum, which title is Gender and Social Work, New Historical Studies and Interpretations. She's going to give a talk about gender and social work in Italy, the second post-war experience.
Thank you. Thank you to the organizer and thank you to Teresa. And I am especially happy to give my paper in this occasion. I wrote something in French, and so it's the first time I give this kind of paper in Italy, but in English. And just some historiographical reflections. Over the last 30 years, scholars have devoted an increased attention to the history of social work and gender, with intersections with race, class, ethnicity, religion, and so on. A growing number of studies examined the ways in which the professionalization of social work from the 19th century onward became a way for women of acquiring new public political roles and professional leadership and redefine dominant gender relations and hierarchies. Through the analysis of a wide range of sources, research made possible to recover the experience of female social workers and their professional organizations. Furthermore, research led to a interpretation and a rereading, revisiting of several crucial moments of the 19th and 20th centuries, namely the history of the welfare states, the history of transition from fascism to democracy, and the history of international forms of cooperation. My paper seeks to focus on following issues. How did female social workers influence reform movements and the beginning of the development of welfare state in Italy at different moments of time, and how were these policies and movements gendered, and more. How did women's leadership shape the professionalization of social work? How did female social workers redefine international institutions during the 20th century? Although the histories of Republican Italy multiplied in recent decades, references to the important laboratory or workshop, I don't know the right word, of ideas and of the future society, represented by the first schools for social workers at the first stage of social service in the post-war I and post-war II years, rarely appear. It is a neglected history that deserves to be reconsidered through the analysis of the practices and inspiring motives of women and men who founded a culture of social service in Italy, supporting the rebuilding of the country after the Second World War. Unfortunately, Very rich archival material are now dispersed in different locations and risk deterioration and disappearance. For example, the archive of the fascist high school of social assistance in Rome at San Gregorio Arcelio, founded in 1928 on the initiatives of the Fascist Confederation of Industrialists and under the control of the Fascist Party, is missing, so we don't know where it is. I think that in examining the Italian case, it is important to adopt a long-term perspective to the history of women's social work, tracing the continuities between the reform policies introduced during the period of the liberal government in Italy and the professionalization of social work after World War II. So, in fact, I will speak about two transitions, not just one. In this respect, women's activism in so-called, I quote, practical feminism, femminismo pratico, at the beginning of the 20th century and their mobilization during the World War I were crucial in establishing women's role in social welfare policies and in linking social work to the pursuit of women's citizenship rights. So this morning there was I was not here on the morning, but there was an interesting discussion about the relation between social citizenship and political citizenship. So I think it's very important to renew this aspect of the discussion of tomorrow, of this morning. And with the rise of fascism in the 20s, the strong philanthropic tradition which led to the organization of factory social service was incorporated into the regime, along with many female social workers active since the liberal period at national and local level. During the World War I, a lot of women associations engaged in the attempt to integrate women into the political body through the assumption of a recognized role in the defense of the nation at war. Many of them were committed in the war efforts to organizing welfare initiatives supporting soldiers and their families, and very soon were absorbed by the government organization such as the Assistenza Civile e National Propaganda Committee. I would like to mention some especially some women, and one of these is Paulina Tarugi, because Paulina Tarugi is one of the examples of discontinuities and discontinuities in a path of life. Paulina Tarugi was one of the first Italian women, maybe Roberta know her, to obtain a degree in law. Tarugi suggests not only the existence of a female leadership in the foundation of Italian social service, but also the presence of some elements of continuity between the liberal state policy and the fascism on this issue, because she was active during the first decades of the century, during the fascist years too. And after the Second World War too. And she established the Institute Italian Institute of Social Assistance in Milan in 1921, absorbed in October 1928 by the Fascist Confederation of Industries. This institute trained the social secretaries, segretari sociali, introduced and they were social workers in the factories. And the initiative was also attended by many women who were part of the practical feminism. At European level, for instance, in France, just in 1917, it was the National Council of French Women created, chaired by Cécile Brunswick, I don't know if it's the right word, the right pronunciation? Brunswick. Okay, to present a report to the Minister of Labor asking for the introduction of factory supervisors in war state factories during the war. And in 1927, the magazine Social Assistance Industry in Italy was founded. In 1928, Paulina Tarugi, Margherita Grossman, and other women, inspired by the Anglo-Saxon culture of social work, were the founders of the fascist High School of Social Assistance of San Gregorio al Celio in Rome. Born to train the new factory social workers, women. In the same place, there were other two high school of the fascist party, the fascist high school of home economics, and the school of nursery assistants. The school, and this is very interesting, admitted just unmarried women with the National Fascist Party card, a sign that the profession was configuring as predominantly female and as a mission because unmarried. So, in many European countries, in fact, as in France, Austria, Hungary, Norway, Portugal, Romania, Switzerland, in the same period, social service schools were open for a long time exclusively to women. After the first experience of the San Gregorio al Celio school, in the Second World War years, were founded the social service school in democratic Italy. Some were religious, some were lay schools, and they generally were founded by the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration. They represented the legitimacy of the new profession and the definite transition from the concept of social assistance as a philanthropic mission to that of social service as a modern technique made of skills and competencies and aimed at rehabilitating rather than helping, preventing rather than treating. The Conference of Social Assistance Studies held in Tremezzo, this is a book dedicated to Tremezzo Conference in September-October 1946, was the place where the ideas of social work school took shape. It was the cornerstone of the regenerating experience of the professional social service in Italy. And at the conference of Tremezzo, there were Paolina Tarugi, ex-fascist, and many anti-fascist and resistance women. Maria Calogero Comandini, Licia Porta Emone Marzan, and many others. And was a kind of confrontation between the past and the future. And especially Maria Calogero Comandini, this is with his husband Guido Calogero. They founded a very important school in Rome, the Centro Educazione Professionale Assistenti Sociali at San Gregorio Arcelio, around there, during the Second World War period, after the Second World War period, and they were part, and Angela Zucconi also, they were part of the new Italy in the democratic way. And many of these women participated in 1945 to the first Congress of the International Democratic Federation of Women. I have to cut, but I would like to say just 2 words on Angela Zucconi, because I think it is a kind of iconic woman. She was the director of the school in the New Life School on Social Work in Rome from 1949 to 1963. And when she narrated she wrote this book, 50 anni nell'utopia e il resto nell'aldilà, and this wonderful title. And she spoke about her experience in many different fields to reconstruct democratic society in Italy. And she is very interesting because she was one of the first to introduce the modern technique of social service and community work, and this was very new in Italy. And she was very tied to a great entrepreneur and a great man of the Italian Reconstruction, that is Olivetti, and this is Baby Balzen, you know, because and she tried to import the methods of community work in Italy from her experience in Mexico and in Latin America, in other countries of Latin America. And she took these models of community work to launch a lot of new, very important pilot project of community development in Basilicata, 1953, ai Sassi di Matera, and in Abruzzo, 1956. But, and I conclude, Angela Zucconi was very active, not just in the 50s, but in the 60s, and she was very important for the definite professionalization of women in social work and in its institutionalization. For instance, she was one of the founders of the Institute for Social Workers in Public Housing in 1969. in 1963. I can speak about this, but was a very intensive project, and just to say, in 1964, over the 93% of the Institute for Social Working in Public Housing were women under 30. And there were some women even as top executives, so it's very rare, and was very rare, as we know. And one of them was Milena Cortigiani, that is still alive. And these women were a mix of sacrifice, creativity, and they insist and try to strengthen the osmosis of ideas between center and periphery, institution and citizenship. So I conclude with the words of an ex-social worker, Maria Stefani. She said that the founders of Italian social work were mainly women who, different in inspiration, training, political affiliation and life paths, were able to mediate and to launch a bridge between different experience, and they create a meaningful and competent dialogue and change gender relation inside and outside the profession. Thank you.
Thank you for this unfortunately brief, because we do not